Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. So today I'm going to focus specifically on different pricing strategies that you and I can use as small businesses. If any of you ever did marketing at college or university or maybe even high school, they taught us about the 4 Ps of marketing. They told us that we need to focus on the product, the price, the placement, and the promotion. And today we're going to discuss the different strategies that you can use to price your products and services in business. The one thing I want you to know, which I think is really important, is that pricing is not an exact science. I wish it was, because it would be so simple. We'd say, if you have this type of business, you do this, and if you have that type of business, you do that, and you just add these and those, and it all works out. The reality is that pricing is, depending on what you're selling, it'll be influenced by so many different factors. So what I'm going to share with you today is different strategies that you can use to price your products and services. So this session today, whereas Tuesday's event was a webinar and a learning session, today's more a bit of a discussion. So if any of you've got any questions you'd like to ask me, this is your opportunity in the chat to post your questions, and I will try and answer as many as possible. I was speaking to a business owner earlier on today, and she was really struggling with some unique challenges in her business. And I was saying to her, as business owners, when we're struggling, that's when we need to reach out, or even before we struggle. But business owners are out there that want to advise you, guide you, help you, push you in the right direction. And if you don't reach out, you know what, you're never going to, get some of these questions answered, or you're never going to benefit from the experience and advice of other business owners. So I've always run mastermind groups over the years where it's basically sitting around with a bunch of other business owners and discussing some of the challenges that we have in our businesses. And what you're doing is you're asking your peers for advice. Just before we get going, for those of you that haven't met me before, my name is Andrew Patricia, and I've always been a business owner. I've been a business owner for over 30 years, but for the last 25 years, I've been educating, training, and trying to inspire business owners to build successful businesses. I've been lucky enough to work in over 23 countries, and worked on some really interesting projects, just like this one, My Main Street, and lots of others, where my goal is to support small businesses, advise them and guide them, and help them through this really challenging process of building a successful business. And I want you to understand that I don't think it's easy at all. I think there are times where businesses flow and things go in the right direction. But very, very often, we really struggle with some of the challenges that we go through as small business owners. Here's the other thing I want you to understand, which I think is really, really important, is that it never gets easy. I know I was with a business owner this week, and he's getting to a stage where he's thinking about retiring, or maybe not retiring, it's a really strong word. He's thinking about a succession plan, handing over the business so he can work when it suits him and things like that. And still, I could see the amount of stress he was going through this week. So I want you to understand that I think this thing of running a business, you never master it. I don't think it ever gets easy. Does it get easier to deal with? I think it does, but it never gets easy. And just like, any part of your business, there's no simple way of doing things. So one of the things that I want to discuss today is, when it comes to pricing, what are the things that you and I should be doing? And the first thing, and I mentioned this in quite a bit of detail on Tuesday, is that you need to be continuously knowing what's happening in your industry. And this is really key, because you want to know who your competitors are, how much are they charging. All these types of things are really, really important. You want to understand who's growing, who's not growing, who's offering discounts, who's not offering discounts, who's running a promotion. You really need to understand what's going on in your market. And you almost need to get used to monitoring it on an ongoing basis, get into a routine, into a habit of checking what's going on in your market. The second thing you need to do, which again, I mentioned in a lot of detail on Tuesday, and I want to emphasize again, the importance of doing price checks and understanding what your competitors are doing. And one of the simplest things you can do is do a SWOT analysis of your competitors. And maybe not do it yourself, maybe your competitors know who you are, or you don't have the capacity to do it. But one of the things you can do is get somebody else, maybe a student or somebody that you know, and they can go and see who your competitors are. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are the opportunities for growth? And most importantly, what you can do to improve what you're doing. Because I've said this many times in business, it's the little things that we do in business that makes the big difference. Think of it, lately, if you've gone into a store or you've phoned a company or done anything like that, and you walked out of there and said, well, that service was absolutely brilliant. I can't say I've had that type of experience over the last few weeks, but I was speaking to somebody earlier on today, and I was saying in December this year, I was in South Africa, and it was really, really interesting because the service was just unbelievably good. You could see that these people were not faking it. They were genuinely happy to sell you these products or services. And I want you to understand this, that if you are competing in an industry, you want to know what your competitors are doing. You want to know what their service levels are like. You want to know as much as possible about your competitors. And this is really, really key. The other thing we need to identify and work on all the time is, what are our customer needs? One of the things that we teach when we teach business plans, we always say to business owners, your job is to satisfy your customers' needs, to solve your customers' problems. That's really the business you and I are in. We're in the business of solving customers' problems. The key thing is we need to understand what those problems are, what those needs are. And once we understand them, then we can create products and services to satisfy those needs. But this is an ongoing process. And I believe that we need to adjust our pricing strategies accordingly. So as the market moves, and I think we're going through a bit of a market move now in our economy, and the reason I'm a little bit hesitant to say what's going on is, in the 1 minute we're speaking about going into recession, then we're not going into recession. And I've just been observing, for example, I know a lot of people that have quite large mortgages, and that the interest rates have gone up, is it 7 times in the last year? And you've got to understand that definitely has an impact on our customers. That definitely has an impact on our customers. So one of the things we've got to do is we've got to act accordingly. And some of the things you can do, obviously pricing is one of the things, but the other thing you can do is, adjust your product mix so that even though you don't make as much revenue, you make a better profit. I'll give you a very good example. Earlier on, I read that KFC is discontinuing chicken wings and something else. I didn't even know that KFC sold chicken wings, but there's a great strategy. What they've decided to do is, because of the economy and because of the time, so that was one of the key factors that influenced their decision. Because of the time it takes to make wings instead of just regular KFC chicken, they've decided to streamline their operation and get rid of certain items on the menu. And so this is one of these strategies you could use as a small business, is that, let's say, for example, increasing prices is one of the things that you struggle, either because maybe you don't have the confidence, or you believe that if you increase your prices, what's going to happen is your revenue is going to come down. What you can do is adjust your product mix accordingly and focus on your more profitable products. And what happens is you may make less revenue, but your profit will be the same. And I want you to understand that. This is why it's really, really important to understand gross profit in your business. Also to understand, for example, overall, what gross profit is your business making? Maybe you could even departmentalize your business and work out what are the most profitable products you're selling in your business. Because I know, for example, when I was a retailer, what I used to try and do as much as possible is around our cash desks and around our counters, I would identify, I used to call them chocolate-coated peanuts. These were products that were high margin products that if the customer just purchased one, it would influence the profitability a lot in our business. So I'll give you a very good example. Let's say in those days we used to sell newspapers. I don't know if anybody sells newspapers nowadays, but in those days, if somebody came in and bought a newspaper, our profit margins were about 5%. But if somebody came into the store, bought a newspaper, and then we used to have these chocolate-coated peanut clusters on the counter, if they bought one of those, the profit margin went up to 15%. So just that simple little process of re-merchandising the store, of adjusting what we were selling, increased our profitability. And I want you to think about that. I want you to look at your business and say, is there a better way to make the same profit and maybe not increase the prices? Or if you have to increase the prices, because there's no doubt in my mind that every single one of us, including myself, have to increase our prices in 2023 because now we've got inflation. We've got inflation, our expenses have gone up, we've got to adjust our pricing strategies accordingly. And it's really, really important. So one of the things that people use, which I've never really liked, but I'm not going to change it. I mean, if people have been using this their whole lives, I was with a client recently, and I was asking them, how do you price your stuff? And they say, well, we take our cost and we add on 100% markup. That's the way they do it. They've always done that. And that strategy is one used in retail, it's used in many different businesses. Here's the thing I want you to understand, is that having an across the board multiple or markup is not a good strategy. What you want to try and do is, for example, if let's say, I don't know, your profit margin is 30% or 40% or whatever it is, 30% or 40%. Dave's got a really long question. Dave, I'm going to have to leave that a while and then I'll answer it near the end. Or maybe I'll take a break after this explanation and then answer it for you. But what you want to try and do is adjust your prices according to volumes. For example, if you go into a regular supermarket, for example, very, very competitive industry, what happens is they'll have a food, for example, will have a higher markup than, say, when I say food, prepared foods will have a higher markup than, say, liters or pints of milk. So certain things like that, you have different markups with. But I always say to business owners that I don't like markup. And hopefully I mentioned that the other day on Tuesday when we had the webinar, I don't like markups. I like to think in gross profit margin. So I don't mind if when you price your stuff, you use markup to price your stuff. Also because your employees will probably understand that better. You just take the price and you multiply by 1.5, or you take the price and you multiply by 1.2 or 2, whatever it is. But you need to know what your gross profit margin is. I think it is really, really key. that you understand this. So let me just see if I can answer this question here for Dave. I have this photo I was speaking of the other day, and they've been sitting around with a few friends in this photo, and I'll call it once in a lifetime photo that does to us have the potential to go viral, but the price, I'm just plain stuck. I do not have a competition in this. I'm at losses to pricing for the customer. As well as not price myself out, I plan on going large prints to start and see where it goes from there. As I was saying, Global News does want the story. I'm building my website using Nice Page. People I've been trying to help, but all stuck really, and these days people are hurting with everything. I just do not know the worth of it. Other photographers have said, go big in your prices because the photograph, I'll leave this for, because of the photograph. You know, again, there's no simple answer. Let me be honest with you. There's no simple answer. You know, if there was a benchmark, for example, if you could say, okay, photographs like this will sell for, I don't know, let's say $100. But let me give you an example. Maybe this will help you. What happens in the jewelry business is that prices are not based on the cost of the product. I mean, the cost of the product is obviously important. You know, the gold and the diamonds or whatever stones they're using is quite important. But what they generally do is they will take a, first of all, you need to identify your target market, okay? So let's say you decide that the ideal client for this photograph of yours is households, okay? So let's say households. You've identified that the ideal customer for your photograph, and I don't know who the ideal customer for your photograph is, but the ideal customer for your photograph is, I don't know, wealthy households. Then what you want to do is you want to get a bunch of these people around the table and say, listen, here's a photograph I'm taking. How much would you be prepared to pay for a print or something like that? That's the only way you can work it out, because pricing is about perceptions. You know, what's the value of that? You know, if you go into a store to buy clothing, you know that if it's if there's two T-shirts and the one has no branding on and the other one has the Nike swoosh, you're going to pay more for the Nike swoosh. But it's really what the customer values. And I think what I would do is I would get potential customers. That's the first thing. You need to try, and you need to know who's the customer for this photograph. So that's the starting point I would do. Say, who's going to buy this photograph? Once you've decided who's going to buy this photograph, get a bunch of these people and say, listen, I've got this photograph. How much would you be prepared to pay for it? You know, that's the one strategy. Or the other one, come up with variable prices. Say, is it worth $200? Is it worth $300? Is it worth $500? And then you can come up with the answer. Otherwise, really, that photograph's got zip value until somebody offers you money for it. So the problem you've got, and it's a very, very challenging problem, but the problem you've got is that, firstly, you think the photograph's very valuable. Your other photographer friends think it's very valuable. The media obviously thinks it's very valuable. But what does valuable mean? Is that 5,000? Is that 10,000? Is that 100,000? You know, how are you going to be selling it? Are you going to sell it as prints? Are you going to sell it once off? All of these things would influence. You know, so the only way you could find out a fair price for it is by going to potential customers saying, this is the photograph, who's the best, the highest price? Or for example, just think of artwork, think of any art. Where do they find the price of it? They go to auctions. That's where they find the price. So it's not an exact science. You'll often see, and I've seen this, and I don't know anything about art, but I've seen it. You know, they'll go to art and they'll say, oh, we expected to get 100 million, but we actually got 200 million, you know? And the reason is that it's not an exact science. It's really not an exact science. I mean, that Banksy guy, for example, sells things for millions of dollars and nobody even knows who he is. Maybe they do, or maybe they don't, or whatever it is. And it's usually good. That's why they go to auctions. You know, they go to auctions because nobody knows the price. The market determines the price. Or for example, I'm sure you've walked into coffee shops every now and then, and you see paintings on the walls, and there'll be prices on them. And usually the owner will just decide, I think my painting's worth $500 because I've seen similar paintings and I've been in the business for 10 years and I think it's worth $500, but it's not exact science. That's why we have auctions, so auctions are the way that usually art is valued. So this is quite a difficult question to answer, but the truth is that, I think that if you took this photograph, you can take a lot more, beautiful photographs. So again, when you're unknown, a photograph's worth very little. When you're well-known, a photograph's worth millions. I think I gave you that example the other day. And if I didn't, I should have. There's a guy called Peter Lick out of Australia that sold one of his photographs for over $1 million. I mean, so is your photograph worth $1 million? To you, maybe, but it's not about you. It's about the market. So that's really the key. What are customers prepared to pay for this photograph? And if you want a benchmark, there's one. Peter Lick has sold a photograph for over $1 million. Okay, so Gary says, do you have a pricing advice for a small but growing architectural firm? We are a 12-year-old Toronto firm now specializing in daycares, chain cafes, cannabis retail, manufacturing. Pricing of competitors not known, but pros are not to be price competitive. Here's the thing, Gary, it's very, very difficult to price architectural services without knowing what your competitors are charging. So this is what I would do, is I would ask a friend that has a property and say to them, please, won't you phone these 5 architectural firms and ask them to give you a quote, not a drawing, just a quote of how much they would charge to do these architectural drawings. That's the only way you can find out. There's no way you can decide if your price is fair or not based on any calculations. Because in the case of architectural firms, if I'm a startup, and I don't have any experience, I don't think I can charge much. But if I have, because really I think architectural firms are about your experience, about your expertise, about your resume, about all of those things. So I believe that the only way you could find out what's a fair price for your architectural services is by doing exactly that. There's just no way you can know without knowing what your competitors are charging. So what I would do if I was you, I would find similar architectural firms so sadly, the OA is a little club on what you're asking. If it became known, is professional malpractice. I don't understand, for example, how that is malpractice if I, as a property owner, phone 5 different architectural firms for a quote. I don't understand it. I do that regularly, actually. Whenever I do a work at home, I will phone 3 or 4 different companies to come and give me a quote. My brother, actually, interestingly enough, is in the construction business, and he does this regularly. So I don't understand. Maybe, obviously, you understand the industry much better than me, but I can't understand how it could be professional malpractice if somebody asks somebody else for a quote, just saying, can you give me an idea of how much the architectural drawings are going to be for a house? So that's what I would do. Because if you don't know, Gary, if you don't know the price that your competitors are charging or how they do that, it's really, really challenging. I'm telling you, it's really challenging. And I'm sure some of these daycares or cannabis retail stores, whatever it is, they'll often get quotes. If an architect comes to me and says to me, you know what, it's going to cost you $100,000 for the architectural drawings, if I think it's fair, and I don't know what fair is, because I don't typically buy architectural drawings. What I will probably do if I think the price is too high, Okay, so I, I mean, I don't understand, Gary, you're saying ordinary, but remember, it's a small club, only 900 licensed architectural firms in Toronto. We just ask clients what they're thinking of. Okay, so if that's the case, there's almost no way to calculate. If you're saying the only way you can calculate it is that formula I gave on Tuesday. You take your fixed expenses plus how much you want to earn, how much you invoice every month, and come out with your dollar rate. So if there's no way of finding out what your competitors charge, that's the strategy I would use. Actually, it's interesting, I have a client that is very, very successful in architect. She's just been nominated one of the top people in the top people in Toronto. And it's really interesting, when she started, she said she found it very, very difficult to price. But what she did do, as she became more well-known, she just kept increasing her price. So, and she just started 5 years ago. So Gary, she started 5 years ago, and she's come up with a price. So maybe I didn't realize there were only 900 architectural firms, but that's a lot, I think. So I don't know. I mean, you've got to have an hourly rate. Firstly, you've got to have a rate for your time. And the only way you can work out a rate for your time is by knowing what the industry average is. If you can't find that out, the only other way is by knowing what your fixed expenses are, knowing what salary you want to make every year, divide the one by the other, and that's your number. I mean, that's the best advice I can give you. So let's use an example. Let's say you say to me, I can do architectural drawing for 3 hours a day. Okay, so for 3 hours a day, that's 5 days a week, it's 15 hours, 60 hours a month. If your overheads are $6,000, you need to charge $100 an hour. If you want to use a purely mathematical way of doing it, but I wouldn't do that. I would work it out. I mean, I'm in a similar business. I sell my time, but I can find out very, very easily what other professional speakers are charging, because a client will say to me, they'll say to me, your price is too high. And I'll say, really? My price is too high? And they'll say, well, somebody quoted me less. And then I'll say, well, how much did they quote you? And then they tell me, and then I know what the market price is. So I think most industries are like that, is that even if you don't directly know what your competitors are charging, it's not difficult to find out. So that's the strategy I would use. And I understand that in the building industry, pricing is quite important. So your comment here, bid until you fail and then subtract 5%, I think is a good strategy. I would rather focus on the brand. I want people to buy my stuff because I'm called BizLaunch, not because I just a seminar presenter. So that's the way I think. So let me go through this. Fatima says, how do you price custom handmade furniture? I don't price custom handmade furniture, but how would I price custom fan-made furniture? The first thing I would do is I would work out all the materials, okay? First thing I would do. The second thing I would do is I would calculate the time I used. And remember, to calculate the value of your time, you take your monthly salary that you would earn and divide that by the amount of hours you're going to be working every month. So if you're working, I don't know, 5 hours a day, it's 100 hours a month, whatever it is, that's how you come up with your time. So you take your materials, you take the time it makes you to make this custom furniture, and then you take market-related rates. So you look at a table and you say, how much is a table like this on the open market? And if you say it's $500, you might say, because you're a small business, okay, we'll charge you $450. But that $450 will be higher than the cost of your materials and your labor. And I mentioned this in quite a bit of detail on Tuesday, is that you need to know your recipes for your furniture. You need to write them down very, very clearly. These are the ingredients that it takes to make this furniture. This is how many hours it takes to make it. And based on that, you can come up with a fair market price. if you were establishing a selling price for a new engineered product to the market, would you work on cost plus or another pricing strategy? So, Douglas, there's two things I would do. The one I would do was firstly determine what the market price for this new engineered product is. And if you don't have, if there's nothing to compare, you want to find something similar. Okay, so you want to find something similar. So that's what I would do first. The second thing I would do is I'd go to the potential customer and ask them for this engineered product, which I don't know what it is, but for this engineered product, how much would you be prepared to pay? Okay, so that's the second thing I do. The third thing I would do is actually work out what the true cost of this product is. And in your case, an engineered product, I don't know how it's going to be engineered. Is it on a machine or whatever it is? It's labor plus the cost of overheads plus time will give you a price. And that's the way you do it. But like anything, this is not an exact science. A lot of companies, think of big companies like Netflix and things like that, all of a sudden increase their prices by, big margins. And the reason often is because they started too low, whatever it is. All right, so Matt says we're operating our Pirate Theme Children's Theatre as registered charity in 3 cities. Each has a different average income in 2022. We explore the pay what you can model. Ticket prices ranging by weekday, Monday, whatever. This is going, okay, all these different numbers. Attending 22, less than 10% of the purchases use the discounted rates. Here's the thing that I have found, often offering cheaper prices is not always the best decision. But what does work sometimes is about perceptions. Like Tuesday, you get 10% off, or Wednesday, you get 15% off, or whatever. But I'm not a fan of discounting. The reason I'm not a fan of discounting is that it becomes a bad habit. It really does. I have this friend that's an accountant. I mean, he's a nice guy, but I traveled to Africa with him, to Southern Africa. And in a lot of different cities in Southern Africa, you'll walk down the streets, and on the sidewalk, somebody will be making some artwork, and they will sell it. And he used to always negotiate with him. And I used to say, Fred, do not negotiate with those people. They are poor. So the reality is that some people will just negotiate for the sake of negotiating. And my strategy is, if possible, do not discount. Maybe add value, buy one, get one free, or whatever it is, or buy one and get one 50% off, but you're maintaining your price. So I think that is really the key. And maybe, Matt, you can send this that you've written down on a spreadsheet, and it'll be easier for me to work out exactly what you want. Just write it clearly, put it on a spreadsheet, send it to me, and I'll take a look at it, because that's quite a lot. And just to be able to say off the top of my head. Do I have an Excel sheet to enter these numbers into Finder pricing? Actually, Grace, somebody asked me that question the other day. If I had an Excel sheet for every single type of business, I would probably have hundreds of spreadsheets. But what I've done over the years, which has been really useful, is often I'll sit down with a business owner, and within about 10 or 15 minutes, we'll have come up with a spreadsheet. So Grace, what I recommend you do, if you're not the best, if you're not a numbers person, and I'm just making an assumption here, what I would do is I would sit down with your accountant, and they could easily come up with a little template. I mean, I'm not an accountant, I'm a numbers person, and I could easily do that for you, but that's not what I do, so I can't do that. All right, is this all right? And if there are people out there who would like to see a photo and give me feedback, sure. I mean, I don't know anything about it, but sure, if somebody wants to send you an email, there's another thing I would do. I was thinking, if I had a beautiful photograph, I'd probably go into a gallery. I'd go into a gallery or find somebody that their business is selling photographs, phone them up and say, hi, the same question you're asking me, say, you know what, this is my challenge. Can you help me with that? And sometimes not sometimes, most times there's some really nice people in this world that'll give you advice based on their experience. So I, for example, remember, and maybe I mentioned this earlier on, I used to have this business owner, there was an artist, and she did prints too. And she negotiated a deal with one of the groups, which group? One of the home groups. What do you call that one that's owned by? I can't think of it now. Anyway, but one of the house and home type stores, and she made thousands of dollars out of each print. But again, I would speak to somebody that's in the business. That's what I would do. My company is Custom Embroidery. My company is Customer Embroidery. We're digitizing designs or buying patterns, threads, garments, bags, things much better if large orders due to setup times. Again, all of this stuff that you're speaking about, anything that is custom, the first thing I would do is find out what your competitors' prices are. So send some of the work out to a competitor and see how much they charge, just to give you an idea, okay? But basically, if you think of a machine, an embroidery machine, you've paid once for that thing, but there's a cost of, so depending on the size of the embroidery, there's a cost of time. So what you want to know is how much time is this item on the machine? So there are two things. There's the cost, the time the machine takes to embroider this thing. That's the one thing you've got to take into consideration. The other thing you've got to take into consideration is your fixed costs that you run your business, which needs to include a salary for yourself. Okay, that's what you need to take. And then thirdly, which is the most importantly, what will the market pay? If the market will pay $20, you sell it for $20. Even if your pricing structure says 10, if the market will pay 20, you sell it for 20. Okay, that's the way you do it. Can I get a website, Donna? I've applied, just waiting to hear back from them. I'm not sure what that is about, but that's okay. HomeSense. Thank you, Dave. Let's see. I have a niche market and am able to sell to groups, number of stitches, time, setup, etc. I have a niche market and yeah. I mean, all those things will influence. So, Donnie, if I was you, I would do the same thing. I'm using this example of a recipe again, but every single time you do embroidery, there's a couple of factors. One is machine time, one is setup time, which you've just written down. So you want to take all those things into consideration. So let's use an example. Let's say you work out your hourly rate, like I showed you on Tuesday when we did the webinar. You work out your hourly rate to be, I don't know, $20 an hour. If your hourly rate is $20 an hour, it's taking you setup time plus doing 2 hours, that's $40 plus the materials, say $45. The market price is $70, you may go for 60 or 65, okay? So that's what you were doing. Suppliers are killing me with freight costs, especially only 1-2 pieces. That's a big problem, especially for small business, especially, and I'm assuming you're in Canada, but that's a really big problem. So you've got two options there. One is negotiate or sell your product excluding freight costs. So it's price plus freight costs. You can do that, or you can negotiate a price. But the reality is that in the early stages of a business, negotiating shipping rates or preferable shipping rates is almost impossible. So Donna, there's no simple answer. I wish there was a simple answer to your question. Geez, lots of questions today. Wonderful. Let's see. Okay, so that was all the daycare. There are 30,000 engineers, okay? So I'm not sure what that was about, Gary, but hopefully I gave you some advice there that makes sense. But again, there's no simple answer to some of these questions. I wish there were simple answers to some of these questions. I just know that people I've worked with before, start off maybe not charging as much as they want to, but they soon realize that, you know, in any service-based business, to make profit, you've got to charge a fair price for your hourly rate, which is, I think, a really key thing. So understand that. Have you tried Alibaba to have a look around the respected supplier and can negotiate with most of them? Sure, yeah, I would check Alibaba to do that. Again, just be very, very careful if you're dealing with suppliers on Alibaba. Some of them are very good and some of them are not so good, like anything in business, I think. All right, so this is something that I've been speaking about in a few different ways as I've been speaking about pricing. But really, at the end of the day, you want to try value-based pricing. And a lot of businesses do that. It's on perceived value. Okay, so that's really the key thing. You know, I'll give you a very good example. Every now and then, somebody will contact me about running a seminar, a webinar, a workshop, and they will say, you know, you're far more expensive than our competitors. And I say, than other presenters. And I say, I know. I mean, it's not like a surprise to me if somebody says, Andrew, you're more expensive than other webinar presenters. I'll say, I know. But I say, here's the thing, that when you deal with BizLaunch, we guarantee our product, your customers will be happy, and we offer a turnkey service. So you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is we'll run your event and you take the credit and we guarantee our services. You know, so that's what you want to try and do, is you want to focus on value. All of these things. You know, the problem I think sometimes with small business owners is we focus on the price too much, but it's about value. You know, that's the key thing. If you're only selling time, it's going to be very difficult for you to make a profit. If you're only selling time, it's very, very difficult. So you've got to sell the value. You know, in my case, I say to people, sure, you can get somebody cheaper, but what if they don't show up? What if the audience are not happy? What if they give you all negative reviews? All those things are some of the things that happen, you know, and I'm sure you've heard this before, you know, if you pay cheap for something, you're going to pay in the long term. And I mean, it happens so many times with equipment that you buy or services that you buy or things like that. So what you want to do is you want to create a brand or perceived value. And the way you do this is by focusing on benefits. Like, for example, we were speaking earlier on about architectural services. You know, one of the most important questions every architectural company should ask is, why should people use us rather than somebody else? That's the question you need to ask. Whether you're selling a product or you're selling a service, that's a really important question, okay? And I want you to understand this, is that if you cannot answer that question, then you have to charge the minimum rate, because you've got no benefit. There is no benefit to a client. So what an important part of being able to charge more is branding your business. So I've got a client that's an architect, and one of the first things I said to her when she started 5 years ago, I said to her, you need to become a brand. I want you to do a lot of work on LinkedIn. I want you to create content. I want you to be interviewed. I want you to write blogs. I want you to teach a course. All of those things I said to her. And the reason I said this to her is she was actually an immigrant, just moved to Canada. As an architect, she said, it's very difficult to get in. She said, because all the architects in Toronto, and I don't know if this is true, are old white men. That's what she told me. And she said, it's very, I said, well, it doesn't matter how difficult it is. This is the way you're going to position yourself as an expert. Because if you position yourself as an expert, and this is part of the whole marketing thing, well, there's this perceived value. This person lectures at a university, they run webinars, they do podcasts, they do this, they must be good. And it's really about perceived value. It's really, at the end of the day, you know what? I'm not better than most speakers out there. It's about the things, how many books you've written, how many times you've been in the media, what programs you worked on, and all that type of stuff. And you've got to understand this. Any one of you that are in the service business, you've got to build a brand for yourself. That's what you've got to do. You've got to build a brand for yourself, and you've got to be known as an authority. And I did that. I've done that in 2 different countries. I'm actually in my 3rd country now at the moment, building a brand. And people say it's hard. And I say, I know. I know it's hard. I never thought it was easy. I've never thought it's easy building a brand in a service business. But that's the way you do it, by performing, by showing up on time, by educating, by creating this perceived value. And this is what you want to do. So you want to be known as a premium product or premium service. That's what you want to do. You don't want to sell 80-cent donuts. You want to sell $2 donuts with that are special. When people say, what's special about those, you explain to them. I used to sell peanuts. I was telling a kid earlier on, I was having a meeting with his mother, and he walked in, and his mother said, this is Andrew. He's the guy that helps people start businesses. And I said to him, I don't know, we were discussing, he was talking about online things and about using Amazon and selling this and that. And we're having this discussion and creating content, all this type of stuff. And I said to him, you know what? I started by selling peanuts. That's where I started. That was my first business ever. And peanuts are one of the most competitive businesses in the world, just so you know. Anybody can sell peanuts. You just wake up tomorrow morning, decide I'm going to become a peanut salesman. But there was few things that we used to do uniquely. We used to only sell our peanuts hot. People would say you'd try our peanuts, and you'd get them. We'd put them in your hand in a packet, and they wouldn't burn your hand, but they'd be hot. We also used to say we had the secret recipe. So people would say, can we see the way you roast those peanuts? And we'd say no. And then one of the things we did is we put salt in the peanuts, and it stuck to the peanuts. And people say, well, how do you do that? And we say, we have a special technique. And the reality was that these were just things that we believed. Whether they were right or wrong didn't matter. This is what we believed. I used to always say to people, we sell the best peanuts in the world. They say, how do you know? I said, just taste them. Then they taste them, and they said, they're brilliant. I said, there you go. We sell the best peanuts in the world. Anyway, so those are some of the things that understanding, the value of building this brand, building this and giving value. Because at the end of the day, any one of you on this webinar, I can get lots of people that can do your work. Doesn't matter how brilliant you are, there's lots of people. So Gary says the mix of ethnicities in architecture is related to preparation, so there's a lag effect. Okay, I'm not sure I understand this. All right, but again, I mean, I can only share stories on my experience. So I don't know every industry, and I wish I did, but I don't. I can only share some of the business owners that I've worked with, how they've overcome some of these challenges, and that's what I'm sharing with you today. All right, then you can do competitive pricing, and I mentioned this earlier on, is let's say like that engineering product, you've come up with something that is totally unique, that nobody else creates. And then what you do, you want to try and find a similar product in the market and determine that. Or even services. You might go to other professionals, so go to other professionals and say, so how much do you charge an hour for these different services? And it'll give you almost like a benchmark, so you'll get like a benchmark of what people charge. But again, it's not an exact science. It depends on a lot of factors. For example, many times over the years as a business owner, if I'm having a really bad year and there's not enough cash flow and things like that, well, maybe I won't charge as much as I normally do. But if the customer comes to me, I'll give you another example, actually. I had one scenario where we worked on a very big project, a massive project. And I had no idea how to price this thing, just so you know. So here's this guy with 30 years of business experience, 25 years of training people. Somebody comes to me with a brand new project we've never done before. So this is quite important to mention that. Comes to me and says to me, how much will you charge for this? And I don't want to say, I've got no idea. Then I said to him, I said, what budget were you thinking of spending? And then he told me, and I said, okay, for that budget, we can do this. And that's how I solved that problem. So that's the one scenario. Actually, give me another scenario where I had no idea how much to charge. So I was in Turin in Italy. I was at a conference and I met this guy, this Dutch guy that at the time was working in Russia. And he said to me, Andrew, will you come and train people in Russia? I said, sure, absolutely. I'm a business owner. You know, I take on projects that I shouldn't take on. Anyway, he says to me, how much will you charge? I said, wow, let me tell you the truth. I've never worked in Russia before. So I said to him, how much do you pay other consultants? And he said, well, you know, this is the rate, whatever it is. This is what I said to him. I said to him, listen, what we're going to do is we're going to do a deal. You're going to tell me what other consultants charge. You're going to tell me what you think I should invoice you for and things like that. And if I ever learn that I charge too little, I will hate you for the rest of your life, which was basically how we came to an agreement of price. Just shows you, for sometimes, and I think of two scenarios where I had no idea what to charge, and we came up with a solution. And it worked. The customer was happy. I was happy. The second time, I had a rate. So even now, that same project that I said to you, I went to the client and I asked them for a budget. Now I've got a price, because what happened was they gave me something to work with. Now I've increased. Actually, our price is much higher now than it was 5 years ago. We charge, I don't know if anybody does video, but we charge by the hour. So if a client comes to us and says we want a 2-hour video or 3-hour video, whatever, we charge by the hour, but a very high rate because the market will bear it. So there's the thing. If I had to base it on what other videographers charge, I would go out of business. There you go. There's an example. So you need to know what the market is, and then sometimes you just need to take risks, you know, and that's the way you do it. You take risks, and sometimes, for example, it's like mine. It's not a physical thing. Sometimes I will just try a price. I'll say to a client, it's $2,500, and I meant to say 2,000, but I said 2,500, and they take it, and then we do business. So again, it's not an exact science, but Richard says, I like the concept of defining what the budget may be, and then defining what can provide and how much of the upsell we could do. Exactly, that's what we do a lot of times, okay? Because it's not an exact science. I wish I could say it was an exact science. The other one is penetration pricing, which is you set your prices lower initially to attract customers and gain market share. And I'm not a fan of this. But many companies do this. They launch, you know, they have launch prices, and it works for them. The challenge you've got with this is that sometimes you start too low and then it's difficult to increase. So that's the challenge with that. Then you got premium pricing. Again, if you value your service or you think it's worth more than other people. I know, for example, for webinars, we charge more than, I don't want to say anybody else, but we charge more than most people. And the reason we've been doing this for over 15 years, we've run hundreds of webinars, and we charge a premium. And if clients want to go cheaper, we say to them, you know, we're not the right people to use. And that has been our policy all along, you know, because you'll get people that'll do webinars for $100 or $200 or $500 or whatever. I don't know what they charge. We charge much more than that, but then we guarantee our service, our technology, blah, 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 all those things that clients want. And again, premium is the place. I'll give you another example. My brother's in the real estate business. I was speaking to a real estate agent early on, and I said to her, this is his plan. You know, whenever he sells off plan, he charges more than real estate agents charge, and he wants to be the owning agent. So he sells developments, holiday developments in Portugal, and that's his policy. And people can come to him and say, well, I can get it for 6% or 5%, whatever. He says, sure. You know what? If you can get it for 5%, you go and get it for 5%. And if it doesn't work, just come back to us. But that's because they charge a premium. So the idea here is, yeah, exactly. Kay has asked, is this webinar free? Absolutely, it's free. Just so you know, there's a great example, Kay. So this webinar is free. So, which is wonderful, isn't it? There you go. Then you got bundle pricing, and all of you've had this. I don't know why I didn't put a break between offer and multiple. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But all of you done this. You go and buy a phone, they offer you TV and this and blah, blah, blah. Why do they do that? Is because on the deal, they make a bigger profit, okay? So what they're doing is, instead of the sale being $50, the sale is $150. And the most difficult part, just so you know, is getting a customer on board. That's the most difficult part, because then you can sell them different things. I mean, a lot of you people on this webinar, for example, you've had your phone company for years. You've gone to your bank for years. But what they do is they try and upsell you. They try and bundle things. If you buy this, we can give you insurance. Then you can rent this and whatever it is, which is one of the strategies that businesses use, which can be very good. Then you can have dynamic pricing. So we'll do that. For example, if you do 2 webinars, this is how much we charge you. If you do 5 webinars, this is how much we charge you. If you're doing 20 webinars, this is how, so we can do that, okay? Or can be based on supply and demand. For example, if any of you have used Uber, Uber does that. Depending on how much traffic there is, it will up the prices. E-commerce business do the same thing, depending on the volumes. So if it's, and even they'll charge different people different prices. You know, if you've been onto a site, or airlines, I mean, airlines is another very, very good example. Depending on where you buy, your airline ticket could be a massive difference. I know, because I fly all the time, and I will use different computers because I know how this stuff works. I'll use different computers to get better prices. And again, you know, it's not a big thing if you don't fly a lot, but for me, it happens. And then people adjust prices depending on the volumes, on the supply, on the demand, all that. We had an example for shipping last year. If any of you are in the shipping business, you know exactly what happened last year, as it wasn't shipping, and eventually the prices went really high. Now they're coming up. But here's the thing I want you to understand. I wish everyone in this webinar, whether you sell a product or service, I could give you an exact science. I could say to you, this is how you price photographs. This is how you price services. The reality is that it's not exact science. I'm telling you, the theory is that if you know what the other people are charging for similar services, that really helps. If you have a competitive advantage, you offer extra benefits and things like that, that really helps. If you know what your costs are and your fixed costs and your hourly rate, that really helps. But most of you on this webinar, if I had to sit down with you for an hour, not even an hour, half an hour, and you told me about your business, we could probably come up with a spreadsheet together. Why? Because I've seen this done many, many times. People will come to me with unique challenges, and they'll come up with ways of doing things. Also, pricing is also about confidence. Let me be honest with you. It's about confidence, because sometimes in the beginning, you know, you've just started out, you think that if you increase your prices, you're going to lose customers. That's a bit of a confidence thing. And once you get experience, you realize, I will often say this, and maybe it's a little bit arrogant because I've been doing this for a long time, is, you know what, I'd rather sit drinking coffee than do my work for nothing. I mean, I've got a son, for example, that's a copywriter that charges a lot of money for a day's work. but then he only works with premium clients, and that's his rule. So if somebody comes to him and says to him, this is how much we'll pay, he said, good for you. I mean, it's wonderful, but that's not the market we're going after. He works with premium clients that charge him pay him a premium fee, and that's what he wants to do. And I think this is really, really important that you understand this, that none of this stuff is an exact science, but with time and with curiosity, because I think that's really important. If you're curious, if you want to understand, how to do it, you'll work it out eventually, like I have. I mean, when I started in this business, I came from being in retail. I was in retail for 11 years, and then decided to run seminars. In the beginning, had no idea what I was doing and had no idea how much to charge. But then as I went along, I came up with a couple of rules. And even today, sometimes I'm not sure. My one rule I have is the price is the price, so we don't discount. And I kept that rule for years. And again, maybe it's because I've been doing this for 25 years. I can be a little bit cheeky or whatever it is, but that's what happens. All right, so thank you very much, everyone, for joining this mastermind session today. Hopefully, I shared with you a few things. I think you realize that there's no simple answer to some of these questions, but the most important thing is you don't give up. You try, you see what your competitors are doing, you try different strategies, and it'll work eventually. Thank you very much, everyone, and I'll see you soon.